All right, folks, welcome back to another deep dive. You know how we do it around here, taking a close look at current affairs that are super relevant for the UPSC. And today we're going to be tackling something pretty interesting and timely. It's a story that touches on cybersecurity e-governance vulnerabilities and what can happen when those two things collide. So if you're prepping for prelims or mains, especially mains, this one's definitely for you.
Yeah, this is a real-world case study that we can all learn from.
Okay, so picture this. January 2025, Karnataka's Kaveri 2.0 portal goes down for days. Remember that one? The portal for property registration?
I do, yeah.
Lots of folks just thought, oh, it's another technical glitch. Happens all the time, right?
Right.
But the reality is way more interesting, way more significant.
Yeah, it wasn't a glitch at all. It was a deliberate, distributed denial of service attack, or as we call them in the cybersecurity world, a DDoS attack.
A DDoS attack. Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty big deal, right? Because it shows that even essential e-governance platforms, these systems that are supposed to make our lives easier, are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks.
Exactly. And, India is pushing hard for digitalization, which is great, but we also need to be prepared for the challenges that come with it.
Absolutely. So for anyone who's not a tech whiz, can you break down what a DDoS attack actually is? Like, how does it work? What's the goal?
Sure. So imagine a highway that's suddenly flooded with thousands of cars all trying to get to the same place at the same time.
Okay, I can see where you're going with this.
The sheer volume of traffic brings everything to a standstill, right? That's essentially what a DDoS attack does. But instead of cars, you've got a botnet, which is basically a network of infected computers all flooding a website or a server with requests.
So it's like an army of digital zombies all attacking at once.
Kind of like that. And the goal is to overwhelm the system to make it inaccessible to legitimate users. Like, think about people who actually need to register a property or access some other essential service.
Right, so it's not just about taking a website offline. It's about disrupting services and causing real-world consequences.
Exactly, and the attackers can use different methods to achieve this. Some flood the target with massive amounts of data, essentially clogging the pipes. Others exploit vulnerabilities in specific protocols or target certain applications.
So it's a multifaceted attack.
It is, and the impact can be huge. We're talking about financial losses, damage to reputation, erosion of public trust, and even worse, it can act as a distraction for other, more serious cyber attacks.
You mean like while everyone's scrambling to deal with the DDoS attack, hackers could be sneaking in the back door and stealing sensitive data?
Exactly. That's why DDoS attacks are so dangerous. They're not just annoying. They can be really damaging.
Okay, so this isn't just some theoretical threat. We've seen high-profile DDoS attacks play out on the world stage. What are some examples that come to mind?
Well, one that really stands out is the attack on Elon Musk's X platform back in August 2024, right before a major political discussion.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. It caused quite a stir.
It did, and it showed how these attacks can be used to disrupt public discourse and potentially even influence political events.
That's a bit scary to think about, that someone could use a DDoS attack to silence their opponents or manipulate public opinion.
It is. And then there was the attack on GitHub in 2015, which targeted tools that were designed to bypass Chinese censorship.
So DDoS attacks can be used for political purposes, to suppress information or to control the narrative.
Unfortunately, yes, and that's why it's so important to understand how they work and how to defend against them.
Okay, so bringing it back to the Kaveri 2.0 incident, what makes this attack particularly interesting for someone who's preparing for the UPSC?
Well, for one thing, it exposes the vulnerability of e-governance platforms, which are becoming increasingly crucial for citizen services in India. If something as essential as property registration can be disrupted, imagine the impact on other systems like healthcare or financial transactions.
Right, it's not just about inconvenience. It's about access to essential services and the ability of the government to function effectively.
Exactly. And for a UPSC aspirant, this incident highlights several key themes that are likely to come up in the exam, like the importance of cybersecurity, the challenges of e-governance, the need for robust digital infrastructure, and the broader implications of cyber attacks for national security.
So this isn't just a tech issue. It's a governance issue, a security issue, a societal issue.
It's all of those things, and that's why it's so important to analyze these incidents from multiple perspectives, to understand the root causes, the consequences, and the potential solutions.
Right, so let's dig into the specifics of the Kaveri 2.0 attack. How did the attackers actually manage to cripple the system? What were their tactics?
From what we know from reports in the Hindu and the Indian Express, they used a pretty sophisticated multi-pronged approach. They created fake accounts to make database entries, flooding the system with bogus information. They launched a massive wave of searches for encumbered certificates, essentially choking the portal with 8 times the usual traffic.
So they were hitting the system from multiple angles, using different tactics to overwhelm it?
Exactly, and they were doing it from different locations, making it even harder to defend against.
Like a coordinated assault on a digital fortress?
Yeah, And reports suggest that the attack involved 62 email accounts originating from 14 different IP addresses, a classic sign of a coordinated DDoS attack.
So they were really determined to take this portal down. And they succeeded, at least temporarily.
Yeah. In just 2 hours, the portal was hit with a staggering 6.2 lakh malicious requests, all using random keywords to overload the system.
Wow, 6.2 lakh requests in just 2 hours. That's an incredible volume of malicious traffic. It's no wonder the system buckled under pressure. So what was the real-world impact of all this? How badly were property registrations affected?
The impact was pretty significant. Property registrations plummeted during the attack, disrupting citizen services and causing potential revenue loss for the government.
So it wasn't just a technical glitch. It had real-world consequences.
It did, and it raises serious concerns about the security of other e-governance platforms. This attack is like a wake-up call. It's a reminder that we need to take cybersecurity more seriously. If we want to build a truly digital India, we need to make sure that our digital infrastructure is resilient and secure.
Okay, so for all of you UPSC aspirants out there, pay close attention. This deep dive into the Kaveri 2.0 attack is just the beginning. After a short break, we'll be back to explore the critical mitigation strategies that India needs to adopt to secure its digital future. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back. And now it's time to tackle the big question, the one that's probably on the minds of all you future policymakers out there. What can be done to stop these digital attacks, to protect India's digital infrastructure? I mean, it's a huge challenge, right?
Yeah, it is, and this is where your UPSC prep really comes into play. You need to be able to go beyond just what happened. You need to understand why it happened, and most importantly, what can be done to prevent it from happening again.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some concrete steps that governments, organizations can take to protect themselves from these kinds of attacks? I mean, where do we even start?
Well, think of it like building a fortress. You need multiple layers of defense, each one reinforcing the others. And the first line of defense is strong traffic filtering.
Okay, traffic filtering, I'm listening.
It's like having a digital bouncer at the entrance of your website,
Right.
carefully scrutinizing incoming traffic, separating the legitimate users from the malicious bots.
Interesting. So how does this digital bouncer actually work? How can you tell the good guys from the bad guys in the digital world?
Well, it involves using sophisticated algorithms and techniques to analyze traffic patterns, looking for telltale signs of a DDoS attack. So, for example, a sudden surge in requests from a specific location, or a huge spike in traffic for a particular service, or maybe even requests that are just malformed or nonsensical. These could all be red flags.
So it's about pattern recognition, spotting anomalies that deviate from the norm. Right.
Exactly, and that's where continuous monitoring comes in.
Continuous monitoring. Okay, so what is that? How does that fit into the picture?
It's like having a 24/7 security camera constantly watching for any unusual activity. Specialized tools and security teams can track traffic in real time. They can identify anomalies, and they can trigger alerts if a potential attack is underway.
So we're not just sitting ducks. We're actively looking for signs of trouble. It's a proactive approach to security rather than reactive.
Exactly. The sooner you detect an attack, the better your chances of mitigating it. And that brings us to another important strategy, rate limiting.
Rate limiting. Now that's a new one for me. Break it down for us. What does that involve?
Sure, so think of it like setting speed limits on a highway. By limiting the number of requests that a user can make within a certain time frame, you can prevent the system from getting overwhelmed by a sudden flood of traffic.
So it's like controlling the flow of traffic to prevent a digital traffic jam.
Exactly, whether that traffic's coming from real users or from bots.
Makes sense. So we've got traffic filtering, continuous monitoring, rate limiting. That's a good start. But what about the bots themselves? How do we stop them from even getting to the gate in the first place?
Well, that's where bot detection technologies come in. And they've gotten really sophisticated in recent years. They use a variety of techniques to distinguish between real human users and those pesky automated bots.
Okay, give us some example. How can you tell a bot from a real human in the online world?
So some techniques focus on analyzing user behavior browsing patterns. Bots tend to exhibit certain predictable patterns, like navigating websites in a very linear fashion, clicking on links super rapidly, or filling out forms with data that just doesn't make sense.
So you're looking for those telltale signs that something's not quite human.
Exactly. And then, of course, there are CAPTCHAs, those puzzles that ask you to identify images or type in distorted text. They're designed to be easy for humans to solve, but difficult for bots.
Oh yeah, those things, I've definitely run into those. It's like a digital Turing test to separate the humans from the machines.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got traffic filtering, continuous monitoring, rate limiting, bot detection, all good stuff. But what else can we add to our cybersecurity arsenal?
Well, strong authentication is absolutely crucial. This means moving beyond simple passwords to multi-factor authentication, where users need to provide multiple forms of verification to access sensitive systems.
Like a password plus a one-time code sent to their phone or something?
Exactly. It adds an extra layer of security that makes it much harder for unauthorized users to get in.
I've definitely seen that becoming more common, even for things like email accounts and social media. It's a good trend.
It is, and it needs to accelerate, especially for e-governance platforms that hold sensitive citizen data like ODHR healthcare records, financial information. All of these need the strongest possible authentication mechanisms.
Makes sense. So what about regular security audits? Are those a good idea?
Absolutely. Think of them like a health checkup for your digital infrastructure. You're looking for potential vulnerabilities, outdated software, weak passwords, anything that could be exploited by attackers.
So it's not just about building strong walls, it's about regularly inspecting those walls to make sure there are no cracks or weak spots.
Exactly. You have to stay vigilant. But even with all these technical measures in place, there's another crucial element that often gets overlooked: collaboration.
Collaboration. Okay. I'm intrigued. What do you mean by that in this context?
Government organizations, they can't operate in silos. They need to work together, sharing information about threats, best practices, incident response strategies.
So it's about creating a united front against these cyber threats, rather than each entity trying to fight the battle alone.
Exactly. And this includes collaborating with cybersecurity agencies and experts who can provide specialized knowledge and support.
So it's a team effort. Okay, that makes sense. But what about the role of citizens themselves? Can they do anything to help strengthen cybersecurity?
That's a great point. User awareness and education are absolutely essential. Citizens need to be aware of the risks, they need to understand basic cybersecurity hygiene, and they need to know how to protect themselves from things like phishing attacks, malware, and other threats.
So it's not just about technology, it's about creating a culture of cybersecurity awareness. People need to be educated about the risks and empowered to take steps to protect themselves and their data.
Precisely. Everyone has a role to play in this digital age. And then finally, and this is really important, organizations need to have a solid incident response plan in place.
Okay, so if all else fails and an attack does happen, we need to be prepared.
Exactly. It's like a fire drill for cyber attacks. It outlines the steps to take if an attack occurs, who to contact, how to contain the damage, and how to recover quickly. It's about minimizing the impact and getting things back to normal as soon as possible.
So it's about hoping for the best but preparing for the worst.
Exactly. And remember, this is not just a technical issue. It has economic, political, and social implications. It's about protecting citizen data, ensuring the continuity of essential services, and safeguarding national security in an increasingly digital world.
This is heavy stuff, really important for anyone who's aspired to serve in the Indian Civil Services. Speaking of which, what happened after the attack on the Kaveri 2.0 portal? Did they manage to recover?
Yes, thankfully the portal was restored on February 5th, but not without significant disruption. And there were definitely some lessons learned.
Yeah, I bet. So the story doesn't end there. There's more to unpack, more to analyze, more to learn.
Absolutely. This incident has implications that go way beyond just property registration in Karnataka. This is about the future of e-governance in India and the challenges we need to overcome to build a secure and resilient digital society.
Okay, well then let's dive into those implications and takeaways in the final part of our deep dive. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back for the final part of our deep dive, and we've covered a lot of ground. So far, we've talked about what a DDoS attack is, how the hackers targeted the Kaveri 2.0 portal, and all those mitigation strategies, right? Those layers of defense.
Right, all those things you can do to protect yourself.
Exactly. But as we know, even the best defenses can sometimes be breached.
Yeah, and the Kaveri 2.0 attack, that's a perfect example of that. Even though the portal was restored eventually on February 5th,
Right, February 5th.
the effects, those were pretty significant.
Okay, so let's talk about those aftershocks. What were those lasting effects, both practically speaking and for the bigger picture of e-governance in India?
Well, if you look at the reports from the Hindu and the Indian Express, they highlighted a pretty big drop in property registrations.
Oh, really? Even after the portal was back up and running?
Yeah, it seems like people were a bit hesitant to trust the system again after such a public, security breach.
That makes sense. I mean, I'd probably feel the same way if my data had been compromised.
Yeah, it's natural. So it wasn't just a temporary disruption. It had a real impact on those citizen services and probably on government revenue, too.
Right, because if people aren't registering properties, then the government isn't collecting those fees and taxes.
Exactly. And beyond the, immediate problems, this incident, it really exposed how vulnerable a key e-governance platform can be. It's like a wake-up call, not just for Karnataka, but for the whole country.
Right. If it can happen to them, it can happen anywhere.
Exactly. If a property registration portal can be brought down, What about other crucial systems, the ones that handle healthcare data or financial transactions?
Okay, now that's a scary thought. It really emphasizes how important robust cybersecurity measures are across the board.
No doubt. And this is where your UPSC prep becomes so crucial. You need to be able to analyze these incidents and understand the implications. You need to think about solutions.
It's not just about memorizing facts and figures, it's about applying your knowledge to real-world problems.
Precisely.
Okay, so for our listeners who are studying for the UPSC, think of this as a case study. How would you as a future policymaker approach this challenge? What steps would you take to ensure that India's digital infrastructure is secure and resilient?
I think the Kaveri 2.0 attack, it shows us that we need a multi-pronged approach to cybersecurity. It's not just about technology, even though that's a big part of it.
Right, it's about policy too.
Exactly, and about raising awareness among users.
Building a culture of security.
Right, so how can we strengthen our legal frameworks, incentivize better security practices, empower citizens to protect themselves online? Those are the kinds of questions we need to be asking.
It's a huge task, but it's essential if India wants to be a leader in the digital age.
It is, and it's a challenge that you, as future policymakers, will be tasked with addressing.
So no pressure, right? Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've explored the technical stuff, the impact on e-governance, and the steps we need to take to protect India's digital future.
Hopefully it's been helpful for everyone listening.
Definitely. And remember the insights you gain from analyzing real-world events like this cyber attack. That's what's going to set you apart in the UTSC exam.
So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for excellence.
And for more deep dives into current affairs that matter for your UPSC prep, don't forget to subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We'll be back with more insights, analysis, and discussions to help you ace that exam.
Best of luck, and we'll see you next time.
Until then, keep those comments and questions coming. We love hearing from you.
And just so you know, this episode was based on reporting from The Hindu and the Indian Express.